The clatter of a fork against my plate was the only sound in the quiet dining room when the phone rang. I'd just finished scraping the last of the meatloaf into the trash, Maggie's recipe, though mine never seemed to taste the same without her touch. The empty chair across from me was a reminder of 2 years of dinners eaten alone. The caller ID glowed softly, and I felt a tug at my chest. "Amelia," it read. "My daughter, Dad. How are you holding up?" Her voice came through warm and melodic, familiar in a way that still brought a rush of comfort and loneliness. I leaned back in Maggie's old recliner. The leather cracked and softened from years of her evening reading. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just had dinner. About to watch the news." I didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that I'd spent the last hour staring at Maggie's photograph on the mantel, tracing her smile with my eyes. "Are you eating enough?" Amelia pressed. "Remember, you can order groceries online now." "I showed you the app, remember?" "I'm eating plenty," I interrupted gently, though I did have a little scare yesterday. "Left the burner on under the coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it before anything happened." Silence. I could imagine her frowning, the same crease between her brows Maggie used to get when she worried. "Dad, maybe we should think about getting someone to check on you more regularly. Your brother thinks I'm fine," I said quickly. "How's your trip going?" "You're in Dallas, right?" "Yes," Amelia sighed. "Conference wraps up tomorrow. Eric's been handling most of the client dinners while I sit through presentations about digital marketing. Honestly, I'm exhausted." She gave a small laugh, but it was forced. "Anyway, I need to run. Eric and I have dinner with investors tonight." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Take care, okay?" The line clicked, but instead of the usual silence, I heard rustling. Her phone must have slipped into her purse. I reached for the receiver to hang up. Then I froze. Eric, Amelia's voice, sharper now, filtered through the muffled microphone. "You saw how forgetful he's getting. He nearly set the house on fire." My breath caught. "It's time, Amelia," Eric replied, cold and deliberate. "He's a burden. We can't risk it. The house is worth at least 8, maybe 900,000 in this market. We sell it, put him in a decent nursing home, and finally get that place in Austin with the lake view." My daughter laughed. Actually laughed. "You should have heard him tonight, Eric. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea." The phone slipped from my hand, crashing onto the hardwood Maggie and I had installed with our own backs and blistered hands more than 2 decades ago. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the hall, her 15th anniversary gift to me, marking the moment my world cracked. Stared at Maggie's picture on the mantel. Her eyes, frozen in that frame, seemed to cut into me. Was it disappointment, warning, or simply the kind of knowledge only those already gone could carry? The spring crickets sang outside in the garden Maggie once tended. Inside, something colder settled in my chest. They thought I was helpless, that I was confused, that I was already gone, but I wasn't, and I wasn't nearly as broken as they believed. I don't know how long I sat in the dark. When I finally moved, it was like dragging a body heavier than my own. I switched on the lamp, flooding the living room with warm light. Everywhere I looked was sacrifice. The burgundy sofa where Amelia did homework while I stayed up after long shifts. The coffee table I'd built, sanding it smooth in the garage while she played nearby. I opened the kitchen drawer, hands trembling until they found the old file folder Maggie always told me to keep. "You never know when you might need it," she'd said. Inside were 20 years of records, receipts from Amelia's college tuition, $52,000. I remembered working double shifts, coming home caked in dust, Maggie waiting with coffee while I did the math. "Jack, you're working yourself to death," she'd whispered one night. "She deserves better," I'd muttered, scratching numbers into a yellow pad. "She's smart enough for anything." Maggie had kissed the crown of my head. "Just don't give her so much she forgets to be grateful." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding folder was there too, $30,000 for a single day. I told Amelia we could manage 5, maybe 8. She cried until I caved, working weekends laying tile to cover the cost. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during our dance. I'll never forget this. But she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan, forgotten who called in favors when she couldn't find work, forgotten every sacrifice. I flipped to bank statements from 2 years ago when Eric lost his job temporarily. They'd moved in, promised to pay rent once we're back on our feet. I footed the bills, bought the groceries, covered Eric's car repair for $200 that emptied my savings. At their anniversary dinner last month, I picked up the $250 tab while Eric boasted to his friends, "Jack's like a father to me, luckiest guy alive to marry into this family." And I'd been proud. Foolish, generous, proud. I climbed the stairs to Maggie's and my bedroom, unchanged since the day she left me. Her jewelry box sat untouched. Her glasses rested beside a half-read novel. I pulled the original deed from the bottom drawer. Jack Thompson and Maggie Thompson, 1999. My name alone now. I stood there, surrounded by our life's work, and something inside me shifted. The hurt cut deep, sharp as glass. But beneath it, something harder was forming. They wanted to sell my sweat and bones. They thought I was too old, too grateful, too blind. Maggie's voice whispered in my memory. Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. She had forgotten, but I would remind her. In my office, I opened the drawer and pulled out a business card. Daniel Mercer, real estate attorney. Maggie had insisted we meet him years ago when the diagnosis came. It was time to call him again. The next morning I walked through my house like a stranger. Not home anymore, but square footage and market value. I touched the granite countertops I'd installed myself. Maggie picked the gold-flecked pattern, saying it reminded her of sunlight. I remembered the morning Amelia had taken her first wobbly steps right here into Maggie's arms. Every corner told a story. Christmas mornings, dollhouses I built from scratch, algebra homework at the desk I'd crafted to fit her window. And now she called me a burden. I picked up Daniel's card, its edges worn from years in my drawer. My decision was steady. Caitlin and Eric thought they'd outsmart me. They were about to learn otherwise. Mercer & Co. has occupied the second floor of a sandstone building on East Hawthorne Boulevard. Modest, tidy, the kind of office that solved problems instead of impressing them. I put on my best navy suit, the one Maggie bought me for Amelia's graduation, and arrived 15 minutes early. My hands didn't shake as I signed in. "Mr. Thompson," said the receptionist, a woman with silver hair and steady eyes. "Daniel will be right with you." Daniel Mercer looked about 55 with graying temples and the calm of a man who'd heard ugly family stories too many times to flinch. His office walls held law books and photographs of a happy mess, 2 teenagers in soccer gear, a golden retriever with its tongue lolling, a wife with a fierce smile. "Jack," he said, offering coffee. "I remember you and Maggie from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I replied, surprised at the steadiness of my own voice. "I need to discuss something delicate. About my daughter and son-in-law," he nodded, pen ready. "I'm listening." I told him everything, the phone that didn't hang up, the voices I was never meant to hear. "He's a burden. It's time. Sell the house." I told him about the numbers, the plans, the laughter. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. "More common than you'd think," he said. "Adult children, assets on the line, that what's best becomes what's easiest. Let's be clear about fundamentals. The deed is in your name alone since Maggie passed?" "Yes, sir. Joint ownership transferred to me." "Then they have no legal claim to your property," Daniel said, crisp and direct. "They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a facility, cannot access your accounts without your explicit consent or a court order, which they won't get, barring incapacity. And from where I sit, you're abundantly capable." Relief washed through me in a sudden warm wave. Beneath it, a sharper edge formed. "So if I wanted to sell it myself?" "You could list it this afternoon," he said. "It's yours entirely." He studied me for a moment. "Is that what you want to do?" I thought of Amelia's laugh, of Eric's precise predatory tone, of every nail I'd driven into that frame with Maggie standing in the doorway, hair tucked behind her ear. "I want to show them exactly how capable I am." Daniel nodded once. "Housing market strong, especially in your neighborhood. If you truly want speed, I can connect you with agents who specialize in cash buyers. But Jack, this is a big step. Once sold, there's no going back." "I built that house with these hands," I said, holding them up. "I know exactly what I'm doing." We discussed practicalities, market estimates, timelines, documents, clear title. He could have preliminary paperwork ready within 24 hours. "Consultation fees $200, he added. "If we proceed, it goes toward my fees for the sale." I paid in cash. Walking out into the spring sun, my phone buzzed. Amelia. For the first time since hearing her betrayal, I smiled as the call rang and rang. Let her wonder why the old man wasn't leaping to answer. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Real estate agents, cash buyers, quick close, I typed. I read with the same methodical intensity I used to scan beam specs. One name surfaced again and again. Olivia Hart, early 40s. Reputation for clean, fast deals. Average time from listing to closing, 18 days. Testimonials that sounded like exactly what I needed. Cash offer within 48 hours. Closed in 10 days. No appraisal headache. Her direct number sat in bold beneath a professional headshot. High dialed. Hart Realty, this is Olivia. Ms. Hart, my name is Jack Thompson. I'm considering selling my home quickly. How fast can this be done with a cash buyer? It depends on the property, she said, quick and confident. With the right fit, I've closed in as few as 10 days. Tell me what you've got. 2-story, about 3,400 square feet. Built in 1999. Maple Ridge area. 3 beds, 2.5 baths. Original owner. Maintained to a high standard. Custom features. I did most of the work myself. Her tone sharpened. That's exactly what several of my investors want. Original owner, established neighborhood, solid craftsmanship. Can I come by this afternoon? 3 o'clock? I checked the clock. Just past noon. 3 works. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning with a fervor that felt less like tidying and more like preparing a stage. Maggie used to say, if someone's coming over, the house should sing. I dusted the bay window, straightened the throw pillows, made the counters gleam. By the time the doorbell rang at exactly 3, the house wasn't singing. It was holding its breath. Olivia looked like her photo, poised, direct, comfortable in her own skin. She stepped into the foyer and stopped. Oh, she said softly, her gaze sweeping the crown molding, the tight seams where wall met ceiling, the 3-4-inch solid oak floors that ran unbroken through the ground level. Mr. Thompson, this is special. I watched her pace the rooms with a professional's eye. She ran her fingers along the granite edge I'd measured 3 times, marveled at the built-ins flanking the fireplace, checked outlets with a little tester she pulled from her bag. Everything square, she murmured, more to herself than to me. And the finishing. Who did the trim? I did, I said. Back in 001, Maggie picked the profile. It shows, Olivia replied, typing notes into her tablet. Let me pull comps. She swiped, tapped, then angled the screen toward me. Similar homes nearby have sold between $850,000 and $920,000 in the last 90 days. Given the condition and custom work, I'd price at $890,000 to move quickly while maximizing value. The number hung in the air like a struck bell. Exactly the figure that had been tossed around over a phone I was never meant to hear. I may have a cash buyer, she added. Local group focused on high-quality rentals in established districts. No financing contingencies. No appraisal. Inspection for their own assurance. But in my experience, they don't nickel and dime repairs. They could close in 10 business days. When would I need to be out? Standard gives you 30 days post-closing. They'll be flexible if you need less. She paused. What matters most to you, Mr. Thompson? Speed, privacy, price, control, I said. And clarity. Olivia studied my face, then nodded. Let's do it. Her professional composure cracked into a quick, genuine smile. I'll make the call. She stepped onto the porch to speak privately. Through the oval glass, I could see her gesturing, could almost make out the words original owner. Immaculate. Custom. Maple Ridge. She returned with a crisp nod. They're interested. I'll have preliminary documents in the morning. If all goes smoothly, we sign, they inspect, title clears, and you close in 10 business days. The grandfather clock ticked behind us like a metronome. 9 a.m. tomorrow? She asked. 9, I confirmed. After she left, the house felt different, lighter and heavier at once. I stood alone in the living room as the late sun poured through the bay window Maggie loved. I imagined the click of a new key in a new lock. Strangers' laughter. New recipes tried in our kitchen. Oddly, it didn't break me. It steadied me. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Olivia arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone. Small contingencies. Clear title and a walkthrough, she summarized. Cash purchase. Closing in 10 business days. Post-closing occupancy for you up to 30 days at no cost. I read every line. Old habits. I initialed where I should, signed where I must. The notary, a brisk woman with kind eyes, stamped each page. The buyers scheduled their inspection for that afternoon. Olivia handled it all like a conductor. Efficient, precise, no wasted motion. Title company will start the search today, she said, stacking papers. You'll get status updates daily, but expect quiet competence. They're good. Quiet competence. I liked the sound of that. The inspection crew arrived after lunch, measured humidity, probed outlets, peered into the attic, complimented the workmanship. Whoever built this knew what they were doing, one said, standing on my stairs and testing each riser for give. These lines are true. Thank you, I said. Days 2 and 3 blurred into forms, calls, receipts I unearthed from Maggie's careful files. The title search came back clean. Every lien long since resolved, taxes current, deed solid. On day 4, Olivia called. They're thrilled, she said. No requests. Full steam ahead. I started looking at apartments that night, small places with sunlight and a decent coffee shop nearby. I found a furnished one-bedroom in a well-kept senior community across town. Month-to-month lease. Quiet courtyard. A manager who spoke softly and didn't mind cash. I applied, signed, and picked up the keys the next day. I moved the essentials. Maggie's jewelry box, the wedding photo, the novel she never finished. My certificates, our important papers. The furniture, the life would stay. On day 7, Olivia confirmed the timeline. Title companies scheduled us for Friday, 10 a.m., she said. We'll wire proceeds immediately after signing. I packed a single suitcase out of habit, even though I had 30 days of access if I wanted them. I found myself standing in the doorway of each room. Amelia's soft yellow walls still holding photos of friends and graduations. The kitchen, where the first wobbly steps had bridged the gap between Fridge and Maggie's arms. The bedroom where Maggie had said her last words to me. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I will, I said into the quiet. Friday came bright and clear. The sort of spring morning Maggie used to claim was made for new beginnings. The title office was efficient and beige and full of plants that never seemed to die. The buyer's attorney was quick and sharp. Olivia slid papers across the table with practiced calm. Sign here and here. And initial there, I signed. Deed transfer. Settlement statement. Closing disclosure. The notary stamped, clicked, filed. And here's the wire confirmation, the escrow officer said, sliding a printout toward me. $890,000 less closing costs has been transferred to your account. I stared at the number. A sum I had never imagined I'd hold. A sum no one else would ever hold over me again. We shook hands, smiled for no photos at all, and walked into the glare of late morning. Olivia accompanied me to the truck. You did everything right, she said. Fresh starts can be terrifying. They can also be exact. On the drive back, I passed landmarks that used to define my days. The elementary school where Amelia learned to read. The park where Maggie and I walked on Sundays. Nostalgia tugged, but it didn't drag me under. I pulled into the driveway, stepped out, and looked at the house that was no longer mine. The keys in my pocket felt suddenly heavy and strangely irrelevant. Tomorrow I'd hand them to the buyers. Today I had one last set of tasks to finish. At a coffee shop off Hawthorne, I found a locksmith who answered on the first ring. Emergency rates higher, he warned. That's fine, I said. I need the locks changed this afternoon. He arrived 2 hours later in a van full of hardware and history. He studied the front door with a tradesman's respect. Quality install, he said, removing the brass hardware Maggie chose because it glowed like late-day sun. You do this yourself? I did, I said. He fitted new locks, sleek, modern, a different click in the turning. He handed me 3 copies of each key. I paid in cash. Then I packed with precision. Maggie's jewelry box. Our wedding album. The novel with her bookmark stuck forever at chapter 19. My certificates and the folder with birth, marriage, deed will... I left the rest, carefully, gently, the way you set down a memory you no longer need to carry. At the new apartment, the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and carpet cleaner, a life reset to blank. I set Maggie's picture on the nightstand, then opened my laptop at the little dining table and searched for something I had once thought I'd never need. Private banking division. Near me, Colorado Community Bank caught my eye, smaller. Discreet, I called. Private banking. David Morrison speaking. "My name is Jack Thompson," I said. "I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. A beat of recalibration. Then composure. "We'd be glad to help, Mr. Thompson. How does Monday at 9 sound?" Perfect. When I hung up, I realized I was breathing evenly. In the hush of a room that held none of my past, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, the clean edge of control. That night I brewed coffee on a stove I didn't recognize, then sat by a window that framed a slice of the city I'd never noticed before. Streetlights blinked on. A couple walked a dog that tugged on its leash. Somewhere a saxophone practiced the same stubborn phrase. I opened my browser and typed, "Mini surveillance camera live feed phone charger." I read specs like I used to read load tables. Wi-Fi enabled. Motion activation. 12-hour battery life, clear audio. I found the one I wanted and paid extra for Thursday delivery. The total, $149, barely registered. Then I drafted the note that would be waiting when Amelia and Eric returned and discovered their keys didn't fit. The first version bled anger. The second went cold. The third sounded like me. "Amelia and Eric, if you're reading this, my plan worked. I heard your conversation about the nursing home and the sale. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is secure in my new bank. I've moved someplace I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Your belongings have been packed and stored at Hawthorne Storage. You have 30 days to claim them before fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me with a plan to warehouse me so you could spend my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost." Dad, Thursday afternoon, the package arrived. I tested the device at my kitchen table. The live feed smooth, audio crisp, motion alerts reliable. Then I drove back to the house, my access still valid, and parked inside the garage so Mrs. Adler next door wouldn't wonder. I plugged the charger into the outlet by the front door, framed to see the entry, and the envelope I taped at eye level. I checked the feed on my phone, perfect, and locked up. Back in the apartment, I set the phone on the arm of my chair. The screen showed the empty foyer where, by tomorrow evening, the first rip of justice would sound like a key refusing to turn. Friday arrived like a drum roll. I woke before dawn in the new apartment, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Maggie's picture sat on the nightstand, her smile soft in the glow of the early sun. I touched the frame. "It's today, love," I whispered. I brewed coffee and settled into my chair, phone in hand. The camera feed blinked up on the screen, my old front door, the white envelope taped at eye level. The view was perfect. Every step they'd take would be captured. The clock ticked slowly through the morning. By early afternoon, I was restless, pacing the small living room of my apartment, muttering half conversations to Maggie. They'll see. They'll finally see. At 4:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. The feed sprang to life. Eric's black SUV rolled into the driveway. My heart slammed against my ribs. Amelia got out first, adjusting her blazer, stretching after the drive. Eric followed, hauling their suitcases from the trunk with the casual certainty of a man arriving home. Only it wasn't home anymore. Amelia dug into her purse and pulled out her keys. She slid one into the lock, tried to turn it. Nothing. She frowned, jiggled the key again. "Weird," her voice carried faintly through the microphone. "It's not turning." Eric stepped forward. "Let me try." He took the key, tested it, then shook his head. "No good. Back door, maybe." He disappeared off screen while Amelia kept struggling with the lock, her movements growing sharper. After 3 minutes, Eric returned, face set and tight. "Back door's changed too. Garage remote doesn't work either. Someone swapped the locks." "What?" Amelia's voice rose, panic threading through it. "That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." Eric's gaze darkened as he leaned closer to the door. "These are brand new." This was deliberate. Amelia pulled out her phone, her hands trembling. "I'll call him." I watched her dial my old landline, the line I'd cut off days ago. After several rings, she lowered the phone, confusion etched across her features. "It's dead." "No voicemail." "Try his cell," Eric snapped. "He doesn't have one." "Remember?" Her voice cracked. Eric cursed, glanced at the windows, then pointed. "That one's unlatched. They'll boost you." The camera angle shifted slightly as Amelia clambered clumsily through the kitchen window. Moments later, The front door creaked open from the inside, and she appeared again in frame, Eric behind her with the luggage. Then they both froze, their eyes locked on the envelope, taped neatly at eye level. My careful script spelled out their names. Amelia's hands shook as she tore it open. Eric leaned over her shoulder, his jaw tightening with each line. He sold it, Amelia whispered, voice breaking. The house is gone. Eric ripped the note from her hands and read it again as though repetition might change the words. He sold it for $8.90, and he kept it all. Amelia pressed her palms to her face, streaking her makeup. That money was supposed to be our future. Your future? Eric spat, his mask finally slipping. This is your father, Amelia. You were supposed to handle him, not push him over the edge. My fault? She snapped back. You're the one who said he was a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Eric gestured wildly around the living room. And now look. We're standing in a house that isn't ours, with no money, no lease, no plan. Their voices rose, clashing like steel on steel. Call a lawyer, Amelia demanded, pacing in frantic circles. There has to be something we can do. He can't just sell it without telling us. Eric's laugh was sharp and cruel. With what money? In case you forgot, I lost my job months ago. And your salary barely covers the car payments. Her face drained of color. You said you were consulting again. You told me he cut her off. What was I supposed to say? That nobody will hire me because of what happened at Hamilton & Co. That every firm knows I was fired for shady trades. The silence after that admission was heavy, broken only by Amelia's ragged sob. We have nothing, she whispered. I sat in my apartment, phone clutched in white-knuckled fists, watching the unraveling I had set in motion. Eric collapsed onto the sofa. Amelia dropped beside him, her shoulders heaving. They stared at the note in his hands as if it might burn a hole straight through them. My note. My justice. I turned off the feed. I didn't need to see more. That night I pulled a dusty bottle of Bordeaux from the box of Maggie's things. We'd bought it for a special occasion, though life had never given us one. I uncorked it at my tiny dining table, poured a glass and raised it toward her picture. To you, my love. Justice served. The wine was sharp and deep, the taste of victory and grief tangled together. My phone buzzed against the table, startling me. Unknown number. Amelia, no doubt, clawing for some way back in. I let it ring. Another buzz, then a text. I deleted it without opening. I powered the phone off. Through the window, the Denver skyline glowed gold in the dusk. Somewhere across the city, my daughter and her husband were realizing what it meant to betray the man who had built their life. For the first time since Maggie's death, I felt free. No longer anyone's burden. No longer the old man they could manipulate. Just Jack Thompson. My own man again. The weekend stretched ahead, quiet and strange. Saturday morning I made coffee and walked to the corner cafe Brews and Views, where the barista with purple streaks in her hair remembered my order after only one visit. Starting fresh? She asked. Something like that, I said. I spent the day arranging my new apartment, Maggie's jewelry box on the dresser, our wedding photo on the nightstand, the novel she never finished on the shelf, sparse but mine. Sunday afternoon I sat in the park 2 blocks over, watching children kick soccer balls and old men play chess. The air was light, easy. Nobody here knew me as anyone's father, anyone's problem. Just another man on a bench. Monday morning I put on my best suit again and drove to Colorado Community Bank. David Morrison met me in a private office, shaking my hand with professional warmth. Mr. Thompson, we're honored to have you. We went through the paperwork carefully. Wire transfer from my old bank, new account protections, premium package for large deposits, debit card, checkbook, online access, all mine by Wednesday. Nearly $890,000, Mr. Thompson, David confirmed. Safe, secure, and completely under your control. Control. That word again. I left the bank with a packet of documents and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a steady rhythm. Morning coffee at the cafe, afternoons walking the neighborhood, evenings organizing what little I'd kept. David called Wednesday evening. Funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active. I hung up, set the phone on the nightstand, and looked at Maggie's picture. I did it, I whispered. On my terms. But I wasn't finished. On Thursday, a small brown box arrived at my door. Inside, the mini surveillance camera disguised as a charger. Sleek, simple, reliable, I tested it in the kitchen. Crisp video, sharp audio, instant alerts to my phone. Perfect. By late afternoon, I drove to my former house one last time. Parked inside the garage, out of sight. The house still smelled of Maggie. Lavender sachets, lemon oil, faint echoes of dinners and laughter. Their luggage was by the stairs, their mail scattered on the counter, as if they had already claimed it as theirs. Not anymore. I plugged the charger into the front door outlet, angled perfectly. Checked the feed, crystal clear. Hung my envelope back on the door. It's done, I said softly to the empty living room, touching the mantel where Maggie's photo once sat. I locked the door, checked the feed from my phone in the car, and drove back to the apartment. Back in my chair, I stared at the screen, the quiet foyer frozen in view. The timestamp glowed. 6:42 p.m. Thursday. Tomorrow they would return. Tomorrow the real reckoning would begin. Friday dawned sharp and bright, the kind of spring morning Maggie always said was made for change. I woke early, nerves buzzing through me like electricity. The little apartment was silent, except for the refrigerator hum and the faint creak of pipes. I brewed coffee, sat in the chair by the window, and propped my phone where I could see the live feed from the camera. The foyer of my old house stared back, door envelope, clean angle, waiting, the hours crawled. I paced, checked the feed every few minutes even though the app was set to alert me. By noon I was restless, eating a sandwich I barely tasted. At 3 I started muttering out loud, to Maggie, to myself, to the ghosts of the life I had built. At 5:11 p.m. my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I froze, breath catching in my chest. The screen lit up. Eric's SUV turned into the driveway. The sound of gravel crunching reached me faintly through the microphone. My pulse thudded in my ears. Amelia stepped out first, stretching her arms, brushing her hair behind her ear. Eric followed, his shirt rumpled from travel, their suitcases thudding onto the pavement. I watched them approach the front door with the confidence of people returning to claim what they believed was theirs. Amelia fished her keys from her purse, slid one into the lock and twisted. It didn't budge. She tried again, harder this time, the metal scraping. "What the hell?" she muttered. Eric stepped in, his voice sharp. "Move, let me." He grabbed the key, tried himself, nothing. His jaw tightened. "Back door." He strode out of frame, leaving Amelia staring at the lock, her brow furrowing deeper with each useless jiggle. She glanced back toward the SUV, uncertainty creeping into her expression. 3 minutes later, Eric returned, his face set like stone. Changed. All of them. "Even the garage remote is dead." Amelia blinked. That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." Eric's gaze narrowed on the brass handle. "These aren't old locks. They're new." "This was deliberate," her voice cracked. "What do you mean, deliberate?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Amelia pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling. She dialed the old number, the one I'd cancelled. She held it to her ear, waited, then frowned. "It's disconnected." "No voicemail. Try his cell," Eric snapped. "He doesn't have one, remember?" Her voice pitched higher, nearly breaking. Silence stretched, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves outside their car. Then Eric muttered, "Window. That one's unlatched." The screen jolted slightly as Amelia clambered awkwardly through the kitchen window, her blazer catching on the frame. The front door opened moments later. Eric stepping in with their bags, and then they both stopped. Their eyes locked on the envelope taped neatly to the door at eye level. Amelia reached up with a trembling hand and tore it free. She ripped it open, scanned the words, and her face drained of color. "He sold it," she whispered. "He sold it." Eric snatched the paper, reading faster, his jaw tightening. $890, cash. He sold the house and kept the money. Amelia pressed her hands to her face. "That money was supposed to be our future." Eric's voice sharpened, the facade cracking. "Your future? This was your father's house, Amelia. You were supposed to manage him, not drive him to this." "My fault," she screamed, rounding on him. "You're the one who said he was a burden. You're the one who wanted the nursing home." His voice rose to meet hers, cold and furious. "And you agreed. You laughed. And now look, we're standing in a house that isn't ours, with no money, no plan, no home." Their voices tangled, rising, raw. "Call a lawyer," Amelia demanded suddenly. "We can fight this. He can't just sell it without telling us." Eric's laugh cut sharp. "With what money?" "I've been unemployed for 6 months. And your salary? It barely pays for the cars you insisted on keeping. Her face went pale. You said you were consulting. You swore— I lied, he roared. Nobody wants me. Every firm knows I was fired for shady trades. You think anyone's hiring me again? She staggered back, her shoulders shaking. We have nothing. I sat in my apartment, watching the wreckage unfold through the tiny lens I'd placed myself. My chest rose and fell in steady, controlled breaths. Eric sank into the sofa, hands raking his hair. Amelia crumpled beside him, sobbing. They clutched the note between them, as though hoping the ink would blur and rewrite itself. I turned off the feed. I'd seen enough. The apartment was dark when I poured myself another glass of Maggie's Bordeaux. I raised it toward her picture on the nightstand, my voice low and firm. To you, love, to promises kept. The wine was bitter and sweet at once, the taste of victory laced with sorrow. The phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number again. I let it ring. A text followed. I deleted it without reading. Powered the phone off. I opened the window. The night air swept in, carrying the faint hum of city life. Somewhere not far, Amelia and Eric were realizing the full scope of what I'd done. They had planned to take my life's work and lock me away. Instead, they stood empty-handed in the shell of a house that no longer belonged to them. For the first time in 2 years, since Maggie slipped from my hand and left me alone, I felt something clean and sharp of freedom. The weekend unfolded strangely calm. Saturday I walked to Brews and Views and sat by the window with my coffee. Sarah, the barista, grinned at me. You're becoming a regular. Guess I am, I said. In the park I fed pigeons with breadcrumbs from a paper bag, listening to the rustle of leaves and the chatter of children. People passed by with strollers, joggers with earbuds, old men arguing over chessboards. I was just another man on a bench, anonymous, invisible. It was exactly what I needed. Sunday night I sat at my new dining table, Maggie's picture propped in front of me. The apartment smelled faintly of industrial carpet cleaner, but it was mine, every square foot of it. I kept my promise, I told her. I didn't let them take advantage. Not this time. Monday morning I walked into Colorado Community Bank in my best suit. David Morrison greeted me with a warm handshake. Mr. Thompson, welcome back. Ready to finalize everything? Yes. We spent an hour reviewing the details. Online access, premium account protections, wire confirmations. When he slid the final document across the desk, I signed without hesitation. Congratulations, David said. Your account is active. $190,000 secure and under your sole control. I left the bank with a folder under my arm, stepping into the sunlight with shoulders lighter than they'd felt in years. No one could touch me now. Not Amelia. Not Eric. Not anyone. That evening, in the quiet of my apartment, I poured the last of the Bordeaux into my glass. The bottle was empty. So was the house on Maple Ridge. But I was full of clarity, full of resolve. For the first time in a long time, Jack Thompson wasn't living in someone else's shadow. He was free. Tuesday morning brought a clarity I hadn't expected. The apartment was small, the furniture generic, but when I opened the curtains and felt sunlight warm my face, it didn't matter. The house on Maple Ridge was gone, and with it the invisible chains I'd carried for years. I walked to Brews and Views for my morning coffee. Sarah was behind the counter, her hair pulled up in a messy bun, purple streaks catching the light. Morning, Mr. Thompson, she said with a smile. Your usual? Yes, please. I sat by the window as she prepared it. The cafe bustled with quiet conversation. Retirees reading papers, students hunched over laptops. For the first time in years, I wasn't in a rush to be anywhere or to solve someone else's problem. Sarah set the mug down gently. You always look so focused when you're here. What do you do? I hesitated. Retired engineer, explains the serious expression, she teased. Then softer. You must miss it. I thought of blueprints spread across kitchen tables, of late nights with Maggie running calculations beside me, of the pride in finishing a project built with precision. Some parts, I admitted, but not all. She gave me a knowing smile and moved on to her next customer. That afternoon I stopped by the bank again to confirm everything. David Morrison greeted me warmly in his office. Everything's in order, Mr. Thompson, he said, sliding a paper across the desk. The numbers glowed up at me. $890,000 less fees. Untouchable. Good, I said. My voice was steady, controlled. David leaned back, studying me. If I may, Most men who come in with this kind of situation, they look exhausted. You, Mr. Thompson, look lighter. I am, I told him simply. Walking back to my truck, I realized it was true. I felt years younger, the weight of betrayal replaced by something clean. Purpose. Wednesday evening, curiosity tugged at me. I powered on my phone, opened the camera app. The feed blinked to life, the foyer of the house. My house once. Now empty. The envelope was gone, no doubt torn apart in fury. The living room sat in disarray, cushions thrown, chairs tipped, as if Amelia and Eric had raged through every corner searching for control that no longer existed. I watched for a long moment, then switched it off. They weren't my concern anymore. Thursday, a letter slid under my apartment door. No return address, just my name in Amelia's handwriting. I stared at it for a long while before picking it up. Inside was a single page. Dad, please, let's talk. We were wrong. I was wrong. Eric pushed me, but I went along with it. I see that now. Please don't cut me off forever. You're still my father. We can fix this. Her words trembled on the page, but I could almost hear her rehearsing them, crafting just enough remorse to sound believable. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with Maggie's jewelry box and closed it. Some doors, once shut, shouldn't be reopened. Friday morning, the apartment complex hosted a small breakfast in the community room. I joined a table of retirees, Ed, a former bus driver with a booming laugh, and Marie, who reminded me of Maggie with her gentle hands and sharp wit. We talked about simple things, the weather, the neighborhood, the little joys of daily life. No one asked about my past. No one saw me as a burden. As I walked back to my apartment, I realized how extraordinary that was, to be just a man among others. That afternoon I drove out toward the foothills, following winding roads until the city thinned into open fields. I pulled over at a lookout where the land stretched wide, mountains looming in the distance. Maggie had always loved this view. "When I'm gone," she once said, "I want you to come here. Remember that the world is bigger than our troubles." I stood there, the wind cool against my face, and whispered, "I remembered, Maggie." I didn't let them take me. The following week, life settled into rhythm. Morning walks, coffee at Brews and Views, occasional dinners with Ed and Marie. I opened an account at the local library, borrowed books Maggie once loved. In the evenings, I read by the window, her photo keeping silent company. And yet there was a part of me that couldn't help checking the feed every now and then. Watching Amelia and Eric stumble in the ruins of their plans. They stayed in the house until the last legal day, clinging to it as though it might change its mind. But the new owners arrived, papers in hand, and soon enough, my daughter and her husband stood on the curb with nothing but suitcases and sour faces. I watched them walk down the street, heads bowed, not speaking to each other. I turned off the camera for the last time. One evening, I sat at my small kitchen table, sorting through the last of Maggie's things. Her recipe cards, her scarves, little notes she'd written in margins of novels. Each piece was a memory, and each memory was safe now, not bound to a house they had tried to steal. I poured a glass of wine, raised it to her picture, and said, "We're free, Maggie. Truly free." And for the first time since she passed, I believed it. Saturday morning, the apartment was unusually quiet. The hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of my wristwatch were the only sounds. I made coffee, sat at the little table, and stared at Maggie's picture. "We did it," I told her softly. "But what now?" The question had been nibbling at me all week. The house was gone. Amelia and Eric had been left with nothing. The bank account held more than I had ever imagined. But life wasn't just about money. It was about what came next. I decided to take a walk into town. The spring air was crisp, scented faintly with lilacs blooming along the sidewalks. Families strolled with strollers, teenagers laughed too loud, and shop owners set out displays for weekend shoppers. I ducked into a small bookstore I hadn't noticed before, its sign painted in faded blue, Haven Books. Inside, shelves leaned with the weight of old and new titles. The scent of paper and dust filled the air, comforting in a way I hadn't felt in years. A clerk with glasses perched on the edge of her nose smiled. "Looking for anything in particular?" "Just browsing," I said. I wandered to the history section and found myself tracing spines the way I used to trace Maggie's handwriting in the margins of her cookbooks. She had loved books. Our Saturdays often ended in second-hand shops, Maggie emerging with armfuls of novels she swore she'd read someday. I bought 2 hardcovers, one on engineering marvels, one on gardening tips, and left with the faintest lift in my chest. Back at the apartment, I read until evening, pausing only to make dinner. Pasta tossed with olive oil and garlic. Simple, the way Maggie used to make when money was tight. Eating alone didn't sting as much anymore. Still, when I put my fork down, I checked my phone out of habit. A voicemail blinked. I hadn't given this number to anyone but the bank and the landlord. The message played silence at first, then a shaky breath. "Dad, it's me," Amelia's voice cracked. "Please, I know you're angry." "I don't blame you, but I don't know where to go. Eric, he's gone. He left. I don't have anyone else." My throat tightened. I replayed the words, listened again. Eric gone. Amelia alone. I set the phone down, staring at it as though it might burn. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Maggie's last words replaying in my head. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself." Was taking care of myself the same as shutting Amelia out forever? She had betrayed me, yes. She had planned to put me in a nursing home, sell everything I'd built. She had laughed about it, but she was also my daughter. I closed my eyes, Maggie's face swimming behind my eyelids. Sunday morning, I went to church for the first time in years, not because I was suddenly devout, but because I needed silence I couldn't find elsewhere. The sanctuary smelled of polished wood and candle wax. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, scattering colors across the pews. I sat alone in the back, listening to the choir. The hymns were familiar, ones Maggie used to hum while cooking. After the service, an elderly man offered me his hand. "Haven't seen you here before," he said kindly. "First time in a long time," I admitted. "Well, you're welcome any time. Coffee's in the hall if you'd like." I declined, but the gesture stayed with me as I walked back to my apartment. People who didn't know me, didn't need anything from me, still offered kindness. It was a strange, humbling reminder. That afternoon, I sat at my table with a blank sheet of paper. I thought of Amelia's voicemail, of her tears. I thought of Eric, probably halfway across the state by now, leaving wreckage behind him. My pen hovered. I could write her. I could open the door a crack. Or I could stay silent and keep the freedom I'd fought so hard to claim. I began to write, "Amelia, I heard your message. I know you're hurting. I also know what you plan to do to me. That doesn't vanish overnight. Trust, once broken, is not easily restored. I won't abandon you completely, but understand this. I will not live under your control. I will not give you my home, my money, or my freedom. What I can offer is a chance, one chance, to prove you mean what you say. If you want to rebuild, it will be on my terms, slowly, carefully. And if you betray me again, there will be no coming back." I signed it, folded it, and left it on the table. I wasn't sure yet if I'd send it. That evening, I joined Ed and Marie for dinner in the community room. They laughed easily, telling stories of bus routes and classroom pranks from decades past. I found myself laughing too, real, not forced. When I returned to my apartment, the letter still sat where I'd left it. I touched Maggie's picture. "What would you do?" I whispered, but the photograph gave no answer, only silence. Monday morning broke clear, the sunlight spilling across the apartment floor in golden streaks. I made coffee, sat down at the little table, and stared at the folded letter to Amelia. It sat there like a weight, daring me to decide. I picked it up, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it in careful script. Then I set it aside again. Sending it would mean opening a door I'd already slammed shut. I slipped it into the drawer with Maggie's jewelry box instead. "Not yet," I murmured. Later that morning, I walked to Brews and Views. Sarah greeted me with her usual bright smile. "Morning, Mr. Thompson, you look deep in thought." "Something like that," I admitted. She set down my coffee. "Well, whatever it is, you'll figure it out. You've got that look of someone who's more stubborn than the problem." I chuckled despite myself. She reminded me of Maggie in that way. Straightforward, kind, but never naive. I sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching people move about their lives. Parents wrangling toddlers, joggers pounding the pavement, students bent over laptops. Everyone seemed so normal. And here I was, a man with nearly 900,000 in the bank, yet unsure whether to answer his own daughter's cry for help. That afternoon, I drove to the foothills again. I parked at the same lookout, where Maggie and I used to sit on Sunday drives. The wind tugged at my jacket as I gazed at the mountains. "Maggie," I whispered. "She says she's alone. Eric left her. She's reaching out. But how can I trust her again? How do I forgive something like that?" The wind whistled through the grass, offering no reply, but deep down I knew Maggie's answer. She always believed in second chances, sometimes to her own detriment. She would have wanted me to give Amelia a rope, not to pull her in blindly, but to see if she'd climb. When I got back to the apartment, I opened the drawer, took out the letter, and sealed the envelope. The next morning I mailed it. 2 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. "Dad?" The voice was small, broken. "Amelia, yes," I said, steady. I got your letter." A pause, the sound of her breath shaking. I don't know what to say. "Except, I'm sorry. I don't deserve even one chance, but thank you." I kept silent, waiting. "Eric's gone," she continued. "He left the morning after we found your note. Took the car, most of the cash we had. I haven't heard from him since. I'm staying in a motel right now. I can't do this alone." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Amelia," I said, my tone even, measured. "If you want to rebuild with me, it won't be easy. It won't be quick. And it will be on my terms. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "You will not touch my money. You will not try to control my life. If you want a relationship, it will be built on honesty and respect. Nothing less." A silence stretched across the line. "Then, I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." We said little else before hanging up. I set the phone down, my hand trembling slightly. That evening I sat at my table with a glass of wine. Maggie's picture looked back at me, her eyes warm and knowing. "I opened the door, love," I said. "Just a crack. We'll see if she walks through it the right way this time." The next week Amelia called again. This time her voice was steadier. She told me she'd found a temporary job at a local bookstore, just to keep herself afloat. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for favors. "I just wanted you to know," she said softly. That mattered more than I expected. One Friday evening, Ed and Marie invited me to a potluck in the community hall. The room buzzed with easy laughter, the smell of casseroles and fresh bread filling the air. I brought Maggie's old chili recipe, and to my surprise it was gone within minutes. Marie patted my arm. "Jack, you're going to fit in just fine here." For the first time in years, I felt part of something, not a family built on obligation, but a community built on choice. Later that night, I returned to my apartment, poured the last of a bottle of wine and stood by the window. The city lights stretched across the horizon, a map of possibilities. I thought of Amelia working in a bookstore, trying to piece together a life without Eric. I thought of Maggie, whose voice still guided me in quiet moments. And I thought of myself, not as a burden, not as a victim, but as a man who had chosen freedom. I raised the glass. To second chances. To freedom. To us, Maggie. I drank deeply, the taste of hope lingering on my tongue. Saturday morning I woke with the oddest feeling, calm. For months my days had been dictated by tension, betrayal, or survival. But that morning I brewed coffee without the gnawing ache in my chest. The sun through the blinds painted stripes across the carpet, and for once I didn't feel like the world was caving in on me. After breakfast, I dialed Amelia's number. It rang twice before she answered. "Dad?" Her voice was cautious, like she was afraid I might hang up. "It's me," I said. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay. I've been working at the bookstore all week. It's not glamorous, but it's something." "That's good," I told her. "Work is work. It matters that you're doing it." Silence stretched for a moment. Then she said softly, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't reply right away. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you could flip. It was a road uneven and long. "We'll see," I said finally. "One step at a time." That afternoon I joined Ed and Marie at the park. We sat on a bench while children played tag in the grass. Ed told one of his old bus driving stories, his booming laugh echoing through the trees. Marie teased him, her wit sharp as ever. I found myself laughing too. Really laughing, belly deep. It startled me at first. It had been so long since I'd heard the sound of my own joy. "You're coming back to life." "Jack?" Marie said quietly as the laughter died down. "Maybe I am," I admitted. On Sunday, I decided to drive past Maple Ridge one last time. Not to linger, just to see. The house stood there, solid and unchanged, but no longer mine. A fresh coat of paint had brightened the shutters. New curtains hung in the windows. A tricycle sat by the driveway, red plastic shining in the sun. It didn't hurt the way I feared it would. Instead, I felt something like relief. A new family was already weaving their story into those walls. The past belonged there, but my future did not. I drove away without looking back. Monday morning, I walked into Colorado Community Bank for a scheduled meeting with David Morrison. He welcomed me into his office, his desk neat as always. "Mr. Thompson," he said warmly, "I just wanted to follow up. Your funds are secure, invested in safe instruments as you requested. No risk, no surprises." "Perfect," I said. He leaned forward slightly. "If I may, most men your age come in here thinking only of protecting their money for heirs. You seem more focused on protecting it from them." I smiled faintly. "You could say that." David didn't pry further. He simply nodded, the kind of respect I'd come to value. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Amelia. "Dad, I made dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just pasta. I wish you could have been there. I miss you." I stared at the words, torn between anger and longing. I didn't reply, not yet. She had to learn that access to me wasn't guaranteed anymore. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, opened a book from Haven Books, and read until the sun slipped away. The week rolled forward in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Coffee at Brews and Views each morning, where Sarah always had a quip ready. Walks through the park in the afternoon. Evenings spent with Ed and Marie in the community room, playing cards or sharing stories. Piece by piece, I was stitching a new life. One not defined by betrayal, but by choice. On Friday, Amelia called again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said to answer. "Dad," she said, voice steadier this time, "I wanted to tell you, I found a small apartment. It isn't much, but it's mine. I paid the deposit myself. No help from anyone." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Pride and caution warred inside me. "That's good, Amelia," I said finally. "That's a start. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight," she whispered. "But I want you to know I'm trying." We didn't say much else, but when the call ended, I sat in the quiet for a long time. Maggie's picture watched me from the nightstand, her smile eternal, her eyes patient. "Maybe she means it this time," I murmured. Saturday night, I attended a community concert in the park. Local musicians played folk songs under strings of lights, families clapped along, and children danced barefoot in the grass. I sat with Ed and Marie, tapping my foot to the rhythm. For the first time in years, I felt part of something larger than myself. Not as someone's father, not as someone's burden, just Jack, and that was enough. Sunday morning started slow. I brewed coffee and sat at the little dining table, staring out the window as the city yawned awake. Church bells rang faintly in the distance, carried on the breeze. For once I didn't feel the pull to go back. I had already found what I needed. Peace in my own way. I thought of Amelia, of her new apartment, of her working in that bookstore, trying to rebuild piece by piece. A part of me wanted to pick up the phone to hear her voice. Another part of me still ached from the memory of her laughter, her cruel calculation that night on the phone. I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I took a walk to the park. The air smelled of cut grass and distant grills. Families gathered with picnic baskets. Dogs barked, children squealed. I found my usual bench and sat quietly watching. Ed ambled over not long after, his cane tapping the path. "Morning, Jack. Mind some company?" "Not at all," I said. He lowered himself onto the bench with a groan. "Marie's baking up a storm for the potluck this week." "You better come hungry," I smiled. "I'll bring chili again." "Seemed popular last time," he chuckled. "Best I've had in years." "You've got a gift." I didn't tell him it was Maggie's recipe. Some things you keep close, like sacred secrets. That afternoon, I drove out to the lookout again. The mountains were sharp against the sky, the air clear enough to taste. I leaned on the railing and let the silence fill me. It struck me then how strange it was to feel both untethered and grounded at once. Untethered from the house, from Amelia and Eric's schemes. Grounded in my own choices, my own freedom. Maggie's voice echoed in my memory. "The world is bigger than our troubles." She was right. Always was. Monday morning, I got a call from David Morrison at the bank. "Mr. Thompson," he said cheerfully, "your portfolio review is ready whenever you'd like to come in." "No rush. I'll stop by tomorrow," I said. When I hung up, I noticed a voicemail waiting. Amelia again. Her voice was softer, humbler. Dad, I just wanted to tell you I'm proud of myself. I paid my first month's rent. I'm working hard. I'm cooking my own meals. I want you to know I'm trying to become someone you can trust again. I listened twice. Then I saved it. Tuesday at the bank, David walked me through my accounts. Numbers glowed on the screen, cold, precise, reassuring. He explained options for security, for modest investments, for living comfortably without risk. It's not about growing it, I said. It's about keeping control. That's all I want. And that's exactly what we'll do, David assured me. As I left the bank, the spring air felt cleaner, sharper. The money wasn't just security, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't helpless. Proof that I could still make decisions on my own terms. That evening, Amelia called again. This time I answered. Dad, she breathed, relief flooding her voice. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I'm here, I said. Silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. I miss you, she whispered finally. Not the house, not the money, you, I miss my dad. My throat tightened. For a long time I said nothing. Then, if that's true, Amelia, you'll show me. Not with words. With time, I will, she promised. Whatever it takes. Wednesday night I joined Ed and Marie for cards. We laughed until tears rolled down our cheeks. Marie scolding Ed for his terrible bluffing. For the first time I realized I wasn't lonely. Not really. I had built something here, small but real. Later, back in my apartment, I poured a glass of water and stood at the window. The city lights glittered, 1,000 lives unfolding at once. I thought of Amelia working in her bookstore, eating her simple dinners in a modest apartment. I thought of Maggie, whose wisdom still guided me even now, and I thought of myself, not as a burden, not as a victim, but as a man who had taken back his life. I raised the glass toward Maggie's photo. We're getting there, love, slowly, but we're getting there. Thursday morning arrived quiet, almost too quiet. I made coffee, the rich scent filling the apartment, and sat at the table staring at Maggie's picture. 2 years since she passed, and yet I still caught myself turning to tell her things, waiting for her laugh, her gentle advice. I whispered anyway. We've come a long way, Maggie. I'm not the man they thought I was. Later I went for my usual walk to Brews and Views. Sarah spotted me immediately. Morning, Mr. Thompson, she said, sliding a mug toward me before I even ordered. You always know what I need, I said with a small smile. That's my job. She winked. Besides, you look like someone who finally figured something out. Maybe I had. I sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching the street. I no longer felt like a ghost drifting through a world that had moved on without me. I was part of it again, if only in small ways. That evening, Amelia called. This time her tone was different, less desperate, more steady. Dad, I wanted to tell you I got promoted at the bookstore manager. It's not a fortune, but it's honest work and I earned it myself. I let the silence stretch, testing the weight of her words. I'm not asking for anything, she added quickly. I just wanted you to know. To make you proud again. Something stirred in my chest. I didn't say it out loud, but for the first time in years I almost was. Friday evening, the community held another potluck. I brought Maggie's chili again, this time with cornbread. People raved, asked for the recipe. I laughed, shaking my head. Sorry, family secret. Marie patted my shoulder. Jack, you're part of this family now. Whether you like it or not, I smiled. And this time it didn't feel like a lie. Saturday morning, I drove out to the mountains. The air was crisp, the sky endless blue. I parked at the lookout where Maggie and I once stood, arms linked, dreaming of futures we never fully reached. I pulled out my phone and dialed Amelia. She answered on the second ring. Dad? I heard about your promotion, I said. Congratulations, a pause. Then a shaky laugh. Thank you. That means more than you know. Amelia, I said carefully, we're not back to where we used to be. We may never be, but I'm willing to try, her voice broke. That's all I could hope for. That night I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, the last bottle Maggie had tucked away. I poured it into 2 glasses, setting one in front of her photo. To you, love, I said softly, for teaching me that strength doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. I sipped slowly, savoring the taste, the moment, the quiet. Through the window, the city lights stretched out like constellations, each one a story, a chance, a life. Mine was still unfolding, not as Amelia's burden, not as Eric's victim, but as Jack Thompson, free, unbroken, and finally at peace. And for the first time in years, I felt ready. Ready to live the rest of my days not in the shadow of betrayal, but in the light of choice. Because they were wrong about me. I was never a burden. I was the builder, and builders don't quit.